All right, welcome everybody. We are Streaming Science at the University of Florida. So in case you don't know, Streaming Science is a college student-driven project-based learning science literacy program. Our mission is to introduce public audiences, especially middle and high school students and teachers, to real-world scientists and critical agricultural and environmental research through interactive communication platforms. So today we are working with Lara Colley from the Center of Aquatic and Invasive Plants, or CAPE, which is a University of Florida and Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences program. My name is Caroline Barnett, and today I'll be hosting this electronic field trip with Streaming Science and CAPE. I'll have my team introduce themselves. Megan?
Hi, I'm Megan Winfrey. I'm a graduate student in the Agricultural Education and Communications Department, studying agricultural communications.
All right, Caroline?
Hi, my name's also Caroline Warwick. I am a PhD student in the Agricultural Education and Communication program.
Hi, I'm Christine. I'm also part of this team, and I'll be on this side of the camera for y'all today, also studying science communication.
All right, and today we are talking with Lara Colley, and she is going to tell us all about beautiful invaders or invasive plants here in Florida and her experience with them. If you have any questions, please use the chat box to have your questions typed in by your teacher. We'll be taking questions from the chat for Lara to answer periodically throughout the presentation in 3 separate question and answer breaks, as well as have some random polls, so please keep an eye out for those. If you type a question, let us know what school you're from so we can give your school a shout out. We will also have a question and answer session at the end of the field trip where you can ask Lara any other questions you have overall. Without further ado, I'll have Lara introduce herself and get started.
Hello, everybody. I'm so happy to be here. I really wish that we could meet in person. That would make this a lot more fun, but we're going to do our best to have fun. My name is Lara Colley, and I work for the Center for Aquatic and Invasive Plants. I'm the Education and Outreach Coordinator. And so basically, I teach people to care and have concern for invasive plants and understand what they are and why they're a problem in our environment. So let's get started. Okay, what are we going to talk about today? We are going to talk about beautiful invaders. In other words, invasive plants and what they are, how they get here, how they spread, and why we should care about invasive plants. And then we're going to talk about what we can do about it. Okay, so firstly, what are beautiful invaders? Why would we call something like invasive plants beautiful? Well, because they're generally beautiful. What are you doing here? Okay. So what are invasive plants? Well, firstly, they're not from here. So they're plants that have been brought from some other range and some other part of the world and brought here. But we don't call all plants that aren't from here invasive. They have to have particular qualities that make them invasive. And so one of those, oh, come help me. Go back to. No. Wait, hold, stop. Okay. Okay, all right. We're back on. So invasive plants are those that are able to establish and maintain populations. So we can think about things like cucumbers and tomatoes and citrus. Those are all from other places in the world. They're not from Florida, but they're not invasive because they need us in order to survive. And so invasive plants are those that are specifically from some other place, able to establish populations and cause some sort of harm. So that harm could be to the environment, it could be to livestock, our economy, humans. That is the other criteria that they have to meet, is that they cause harm. Okay, well, how did invasive plants get here? Well, since humans have been moving around the world, we've also been moving plants and animals around the world, because that's what we do when we establish new populations in new places. We need food, so we bring plants and animals with us. And so when Europeans began establishing settlements in Florida, they started bringing plants and animals from where they were from here. And so we started our adventure with invasive plants. They also traded those plants with other cultures, and so we spread those plants around even further. Okay, how did they get here today? Well, There's a lot of ways that invasive plants get here today. Some of those ways are intentional and unintentional. And so some of the unintentional ways that they get here are on cargo ships, on ships with lumber. You know, we accidentally transport seeds of things. And then we also intentionally introduce invasive plants, which seems kind of maybe counterintuitive, but that's what we do. We bring them here sometimes for agricultural purposes, for landscaping, so in our home yards, in business, for business landscaping, and for erosion control and forage for livestock. And you wonder, well, if they're invasive, why are we moving them around? Well, we don't always know that things are invasive until they become invasive. So we've become a lot better at determining, like projecting if things will be invasive based on similar families that they're from, but we don't always know, and we certainly haven't always known in the past. So we were much worse at predicting which plants would become invasive in the past. And so now those plants are unfortunately already here and they're already invasive. So now we just do what we can in order to manage them and mitigate their impacts. Okay, all right, so once they get here, how do they spread? Well, we have a couple of photos to illustrate how invasive plants move around. You see those little seeds that, with the little feathery pieces that blow in the wind. We trade plants with one another. Here I have this really beautiful plant. I'd like to share this with you. That happens a lot. We move them from one water body to another on our boat propellers, in our bait wells. We, if we go hiking somewhere, maybe we'll get some burrs on our pants from an invasive plant. And if we go to another trail, we can introduce invasive plants that way. And animals, right? The bottom picture is poop. You know, animals are perfect dispersers of seeds. They eat seeds and then they poop. And that's the perfect fertilizer. It's like a little fertilizer packet for an invasive plant seed. So while we'll talk about in a moment, invasive plants don't tend to be the preferred food source for our native animals. Sometimes they still eat them, and so they spread them. Okay, so they spread by wind, hitchhike, animals, humans, and water bodies. Okay, this brings us to our first question session.
All right, guys, we have a brief pause that we will take any questions from the audience in our chat box. And if we don't, we're going to go into a poll. So the first poll is, we're just going to do the questions verbally, and we're going to give you guys a minute to think about it on your own and then give the answer. And then before we get started, we'll reveal what the right answer is. So the first question is, how did invasive plants get here originally? So go ahead and think about it for a little bit and answer in the chat box or answer with your teacher, write it down on a piece of paper, and then we'll see if you got it correct. All right, so the correct answer is humans. So I hope someone wrote that down. And we will continue on with our program. Lara, if you'd like to continue.
Sure. Yeah, so just to follow up on that, invasive plants are those that are specifically introduced by humans. So when animals move invasive plants around, like I know I said that animals move invasive plants around by eating seeds, but if they eat seeds that are native to one place and then move them around to a new place, we don't call those invasive. We just call that range expansion. So Humans are the ones who introduce invasive plants. Okay, perfect. Okay, why are they a problem? Well, they cause so many problems. So there are characteristics that invasive plants have that make them different than native plants. And so that is, one, they tolerate a variety of different habitats and growing conditions. So that means they can grow in wet habitats or dry. They can grow in sandy soil or clay soil. They can grow in kind of cold climates or warm climates. They're just really adaptable. Okay. They grow really fast. So they have a tendency, invasive plants do, to grow much faster than native plants. So that means that they produce seeds more quickly. They compete aggressively for resources. So because they're able to grow fast, they are able to shade out other plants. And so they take up more sun, they take up more water. And because they're able to grow rapidly, they reproduce early, often, and in large numbers. So what that means is, so say a native plant reaches maturity and is able to produce seeds in 1 year after becoming, after germination. An invasive plant might be able to do that in 4 months. So that means they can maybe even produce seeds twice a season. And they do so often, and they usually have lots and lots and lots of seeds. I brought a couple examples of some invasive plants that I have to tell you, I really didn't have to go very far to find them. I just had to cruise around the neighborhood. This is a really common one that if you see it, you probably think it belongs because there's so much of it. This one's called coral Artesia. It's really common in Central and North Florida. And it produces these beautiful red berries in the a couple times a year, but these will turn red soon. Right now, you can see they're just kind of green, just about to turn red, but lots and lots of seeds. Very characteristic of invasive plants. They also lack natural enemies to keep them under control. So native plants evolved in this system. And so there are lots of plants, lots of animals that eat those plants. Well, when invasive plants come here, are introduced, they don't have the kinds of predators to keep them in check. So I want to show you. You may have seen this one. This one's called air potato. It's a really common vine, and it used to be a real problem. It still is a problem. However, this is the way we used to always see it, just like this. Now, when we see it, it looks more like this. What's happening there? Well, we introduced a biological control to eat this plant. So we went to where this plant was from, and we found the insect that eats this plant. We did research for about 10 years, and then we released it. And so the air potato beetle does this damage to the air potato, and it makes it really, it just makes it more difficult for it to grow. So it doesn't necessarily kill it, but it stresses it out enough so that it is less effective. Okay. So what does all of this mean? Like, why do we even care about invasive plants? Why are plants, right? Plants are wonderful. They produce oxygen, they're wonderful to look at. They're green. Why do we care if plants are from here or not from here? Well, because invasive plants reduce native wildlife habitat and they displace native species. They alter natural processes like they can change water flow. They don't die, during the winter time when native plants are dying. And so they just change, they are able to change an entire ecosystem very, very rapidly. They reduce ecosystem health and productivity. And they also cost a lot of money. They reduce agricultural productivity and increase our cost of goods. And they degrade our areas for recreating. So we haven't really talked about aquatic plants at all, but any of you have done any kayaking or swimming, maybe you've seen this one. This is water lettuce. It's really common as a floating plant on Florida water bodies. Water hyacinth. This is why we call them beautiful invaders. This is a gorgeous plant. This is we have to do a lot to control this plant. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to use any of our freshwater bodies. It would just be absolutely covering all of our lakes, rivers, and streams. This one is Hydrilla. This is probably one of the world's worst weeds. This one clogs drainage canals. It causes flooding. It causes fish kills. It's really just a huge problem in our freshwater systems. So invasive plants have a tendency to degrade our recreational areas, and they cost a lot of money. You know, we do a lot of research. We do a lot of control, a lot of managing, monitoring, and that costs taxpayers a lot of money. All right. This brings us to our next question.
So we have a question in the chat box from Science Lover.
Yeah.
They're asking, are most invasive species poisonous?
No, I think they are not. There are certainly some that are, and most of the time, from what I understand, when invasive plants are really poisonous, they are put on the noxious weed list. But no, most invasive plants are not poisonous. They cause other problems in the environment, but less so to humans. Some of them are, though, for sure. That's a great question.
And then a follow-up question to that is, can invasive plants be harvested and used as biofuel or something else that's useful?
Sure. There are lots of instances where people harness the potential that invasive plants provide. I've seen water hyacinth used for cattle food, and also making baskets and things. And there's lots of examples out there. Yeah, that really would be ideal if we could capitalize on those characteristics. And sometimes I think it's just a logistical thing, right? Like some of those things, it can be really expensive to build a biomass plant. But yeah, those are, I think as we move forward in this world, I think that we're probably going to have to really think about those things more so than we do. Any other questions?
I don't see any, but we have our next poll question. So poll number 2 is asking, how do invasive plants spread? And so if you just answer that on the screen that pops up, and we'll give a minute.
All right.
Okay, so how do invasive plants spread? Well, if you answered all of the above, absolutely. They spread by wind, by animals, they hitchhike, they spread from water body to water body. They move around. They are great at moving around for sure. Okay. All right, we're moving on. Okay. All right. This brings us to the most important question. What can we do? Well, we can start by learning about invasive plants, learning what they are, learning the ones that impact your region, and there's so many resources out there. We use resources like these, like plant identification decks, to help us learn about invasive plants and learn how to identify them, and then remove them from your yards. So a lot of people think that if they have invasive plants in their yard, that they're containing them and they're not really moving anywhere. But as we said, their seeds can be spread by wind, by animals. Rain can spread seeds. So if you have them in your yard, they're likely escaping and moving into natural areas. And that's what we're really trying to prevent, is preventing invasive plants from establishing in natural areas, because that's where they cause the most damage. Okay, we can talk to other people about invasive plants and talk to them about why they should care. Because they're so beautiful, we have a tendency to want to protect them and not pull them. Here's another example of a really common invasive plant. You may have seen this in your yard. You may have seen it in your grandma's yard somewhere. This one's awful. This is mother-in-law's tongue. This is a house plant. This one should definitely be kept inside. So that's one thing you can do, is if you really love a plant and it's invasive, see if it's something you can keep inside. Or call it a beautiful invader, pay tribute to it, and get rid of it. All right. Understand that invasive plants are a human-induced problem and they require human solutions. So it's really important for us to understand that we brought invasive plants here intentionally, not intentionally. We didn't realize they would cause problems, but they do. And so ultimately, it's up to us to come up with solutions and do something about them and mitigate their impacts. And so one thing you can do is participate in removal projects. So lots of county parks, city parks, things like weed wrangles or air potato roundups. Those things exist. Those plant removal projects exist. And so if you really want to do something, get involved and put in a little sweat equity and pull some invasive plants, meet new people, talk to them about invasive plants. And it's really a fun time. I spend every other Sunday pulling invasive plants, and I meet so many different people, and I love it. And we've removed 1,000 pounds in like a month of Caesar's weed, which this is a photo on the slide there of Caesar's weed. It's beautiful. It's in the hibiscus family. It's so cute, but it is the worst. It's so bad. It has so many terrible seeds on it that just stick to your clothing and stick to animals' fur and move all over the place. Okay, all right. So this is just a little example of what invasive plants can look like if left untreated. So this is an example of Kudzu. This is just the seasonal changes. So it swallowed this whole house. It's wild. All right, here's an example of, on the left, while to the novice, it may look like a healthy system. However, there's really, aside from the pine tree, only one thing growing that you can see, and that's Brazilian pepper tree. This plant is invasive in South and Central Florida, and it is definitely moving up the state. We're seeing it more and more moving up to North Florida. So this is one to be on the lookout for everybody in Florida. It's awful. And so this next picture is after removing Brazilian pepper. Look at all the different plants that are growing in this landscape. Okay, this brings us to another poll. We'd like for you to tell us which side is healthier, the left or the right.
Go ahead and everyone fill that out in your bottom poll. And we did have one other question. I was going to ask it, but how do you politely tell your neighbors they have invasive plants? My neighbors have mother-in-law's tongue, but I don't know how to say it in a polite way.
That is the best question. I love it. And so my approach is to start out by complimenting, right? Maybe like you could use the criticism sandwich approach, where you compliment, criticize, compliment, but not really criticize. Inform, let's call it compliment, inform, compliment. So you talk to them about how beautiful their yard is and how much you like their plants. And then you could maybe say, oh, that mother-in-law's tongue, I've heard it's invasive. And in fact, I've seen it in the woods over there. I wouldn't want you to lie, but maybe you could go and find someone in a natural area. That's the thing. If you see this, if you see a plant that someone has in a natural area, maybe you could even take a picture, because I think people don't really believe that the plant they have in their yard could actually have any effect on some geographic space outside of their yard. And so I think that's really helpful to see an image. And so if you've ever seen this growing in the wild, it completely takes over the understory. And it's really impossible to remove. So you could just say, did you know that was invasive? If you, I'd be happy to help you remove it, and we could pot it up, you know, for a houseplant if you want. But really, it's, you know, it's about personal choice. And so invasive plants are not illegal. Really, it's just being a good steward is really what we want to encourage people to do. So that's the hard one, you know, really, it's really hard. But I think it's a great question.
Well, thank you. I like your compliment sandwich idea. So I think looking at the results, we had 3 people answer. 2 people said the left side looked healthier, and 1 person said the right side looked healthier.
Okay, interesting. That's very interesting. All right, so let's just see. Thank you. Okay. All right, so the right side is unmanaged and the left side has been managed. So I hate to say I'm not 100% certain what this invasive here is. It was sent to me from a resource manager. It may be, you know, I don't even want to say. I have a speculation about what it is, but and so this was a panoramic that they took. So they treated one side and left the other side untreated. So on the right side, while it's green and lush, this is really not the healthier side. The left side has now at least an opportunity to get some biodiversity back because they've treated the invasive, they've removed it, and now some native plants can start reestablishing in that habitat. So that's kind of the tricky part about invasive plants is that they grow so fast, they're so beautiful, it's hard to deem them as, you know, not great plants, but they're terrible. Okay, all right. Question 3.
So everyone, we're nearing the end of our EFT and we're so thankful that you're able to tune in with us. Are there any final questions you have for Lara?
There is a question in the chat box. Science Lover wants to know, for invasives that are aquatic, is it safe to use pesticides to eradicate, or are mechanical means better?
So all herbicides that are used by resource managers are EPA approved, and they are used within the parameters that they are designed for. So my job is not a resource manager. I'm more of like an education and outreach coordinator. So I don't like to speak too much on, I don't know, I don't feel as though I'm an expert in that field. So there are lots of different ways to control invasive plants. There's biological, there's mechanical, there's chemical removal and physical removers, and they all have a place in the suite of management options. So, and resource managers have lots of education and lots of training and credentials to use the type of treatment that is the most effective and the most efficient in that whatever scenario they're using it in. Yeah, and so we call that an integrated plant management, integrated pest management, where you have the suite of options available to you and you choose which ones are best for that scenario.
So part of this field trip, we want to know how much you learned after we did our presentation with Lara today. And one way that we want to gauge how you learned is we want to see how you relate invasive species, invasive plants specifically, into a meme form. So we want you to make us a meme.
I have them up for you, Christine, if you'd like.
Thank you. Yeah, so here are some examples that we made. Caroline has them up. Thank you so much. So one of them over here pointing out every invasive plant when you're going on a walk now, and then your friend just trying to enjoy a hike. Then I don't know who plays crewmate. I don't really know this very well, but I know it has something to do with someone pretending something. So, you know, who's the imposter? The invasive plant, right? And then finally, over to the right, this car veering off completely where it's not supposed to be going, exactly what an invasive plant does. So Caroline, if you could move to the next slide for me, please. Thank you. Yeah, so we actually, with this Google Doc link that your teacher can get for you, we would love for you to make a meme for us that has something to do with invasive plants, just so that we can have some fun with your learning. And, you know, maybe this is a little bit more fun than a quiz, right? So thank you all so much. Lara, do you have any final words?
No, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all, and thanks for being here. And you know, if I can answer any questions, my name is, like I said, Lara Colley, and my email address is laracolley@ufl.edu, and email me a question if you have any. Thanks so much for being here.